President addresses poverty, drugs, and Caribbean economies at a summit in Chile. He then attends a Sustainable Development Conference in Delhi, India. And former Jamaican Prime Minister P.J. Patterson meets Guyana's Prime Minister and Acting President Samuel Hines. Welcome to this week's edition of The Diary, the Government Information Agency program that provides a recap of the highlights of the country's president for the week January 26 to February 1. Thank you for joining us. I'm your host, Fabian Klaus. Stay tuned.
Preparations are on the way for another phase of the Hinterland electrification program, even as 11,000 solar panels were distributed last year. The government's vision is to ensure that every hinterland household has access to electricity within 5 years.
The East Bank Demerara is undergoing significant transformation as the drive to ensure that Guyanese own their own homes continue. The Housing Ministry's vision is to distribute 30,000 house lots on that corridor alone within the next 5 years.
Community development plans will serve as a springboard for advancing Amerindian development. With the signing of the agreement with the United Nations Development Fund for the release of the GRIFT funds, soon 27 communities will begin implementation of their plans, with most of them focusing on various aspects of farming. The Guyanese head of state joined Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh at the opening of the 13th Delhi Sustainable Development Summit in India's capital, New Delhi. It followed an invitation extended by Nobel Prize laureate and newly elected chairman of Irocrama, Dr. R.K. Pachauri. The summit follows on the Rio Plus 20 conference in 2012 and provides an important forum to discuss the needs of the global community to move towards higher efficiency in the use of resources in general and the low-carbon path of development.
The whole question of the carbon emissions, that is at the heart of the climate change issues, have the third world countries generally have not been the main contributor to this issue. This has been done fundamentally from the developed world, and we are now being asked also to play our part. And we are willing to play our part, and we are ready to play our part in tackling these issues, but at the same time, it needs the full cooperation and support from the developed world as well.
President Ramotar, who accompanied former President Bharat Jagdeo and Sham Nokta from the Office of Climate Change, was invited by Nobel Prize laureate Dr. Rajendra Kumar Pachauri, the newly elected chairman of Irocrama. At a leadership panel entitled Defining the Future We Want, President Ramotar shared a similar view as the Indian Prime Minister about the need to keep the world focused on poverty alleviation and equality, and highlighted the negative consequences of neglecting this fact.
Our experience has shown that success in sustainable development effort is also dependent on the degree of use of innovative mechanisms. Adequate attention should therefore be given to the importance and economic value of ecosystem services in development strategies and policies, particularly while addressing the needs of the vulnerable and poor and marginalized communities.
At the heart of many of these problems is the kind of inequality that exists within the world. The great level of inequality has created enormous poverty in many parts of the world, and that for us to tackle many of these issues, it is impossible for us to do so without tackling the issues of poverty as one of the main issues.
Guyana's climate initiative and the valuable lessons being learned from the low-carbon development strategy and the support being provided by Norway to the implementation of the LCDS were also explained in detail.
We hope in another few years that more than 90% of the energy that we will need for our development will come from renewable resources. But as I said, we need the general support, we need the support of the international community in this project as well. We have managed to develop relationship and a model with Norway in this regard, where they are paying us for carbon services that we provide. And we think that this is a model that could be examined and could be looked at in the whole question of fighting against climate change.
President Ramotar even emphasized the importance of forests to climate change mitigation and the need to identify approaches that would allow countries to maintain their forests and natural resources for the good of the global community. This is the third year Guyana is participating in the Delhi Sustainable Development Summit, which started by the Energy and Research Institute, TERI, in 2001. The head of state addressed Caribbean economies, integration, poverty eradication, and fighting the drug scourge, while in Chile for the first Community of Latin American Caribbean States, CELAC, during the period January 26 to 28. Speaking to heads of government in Santiago, Chile, the Guyanese head of state said that while Latin America and the Caribbean as a region has managed to escape the effects of the financial crisis, with the region actually recording positive growth, the situation in the Caribbean is a matter of great concern since many of the countries are having tremendous difficulties and are still reeling from the effects of the crisis. A preliminary overview of the economies of Latin America and the Caribbean, ECLAC, that was unveiled last December had concluded that the world economic crisis had a negative impact on the continent. But with signs of resilience to external shocks throughout the year, it said that impact has been less dramatic. Latin America and the Caribbean contributes 11% of the value of the world's food production and represents 24% of the world's arable lands. According to Chilean President Sebastián Piñera, Latin America gained prominence in exports of goods to the continent. As head of the Agricultural Diversification and Food Security in CARICOM, President Ramotar believes that the Caribbean, with a heavy food import bill, can learn from Latin America's transformative agriculture sector. He also addressed the drug problem, calling for cooperation amongst all countries as this transnational business continues to infiltrate every aspect of societies. The summit concluded with Chilean President Sebastián Piñera formally handing over the chairmanship of CELAC to Cuban President Raúl Castro, assuring unequivocal support from the other 33 members of the regional bloc. You're watching The Diary, more still ahead. Community development plans will serve as a springboard for advancing Amerindian development. With the signing of the agreement with the United Nations Development Fund for the release of the GRIFT funds, soon 27 communities will begin implementation of their plans, with most of them focusing on various aspects of farming.
The East Bank Demerara is undergoing significant transformation as the drive to ensure that Guyanese own their own homes continue. The Housing Ministry's vision is to distribute 30,000 house lots on that corridor alone within the next 5 years.
Preparations are on the way for another phase of the hinterland electrification program, even as 11,000 solar panels were distributed last year. The government's vision is to ensure that every hinterland household has access to electricity within 5 years.
On January 30, the acting president paid a visit to PNCR General Secretary Oscar Clark at the Georgetown Public Hospital Corporation, who was nursing gunshot wounds and abrasions to his head after his home was invaded by bandits on January 29. He recalled the entire ordeal and was grateful for the attention he received at the public hospital.
I think things went very well here. Good. Because the organized, I think they were well organized. When I got in here, all of the requisite people were here. I think that my time didn't come.
Time didn't come.
Didn't come.
I hope so. You're living for something good.
I'm sure.
Clark was assured that his injuries are not life-threatening. On January 28, Jamaica's former Prime Minister and CARICOM's highest awardee, P.J. Patterson, had paid a courtesy call on the acting president. It was the day he made a presentation at the Rotary Club of Georgetown's World Understanding Dinner held at the Pegasus Hotel, on several loopholes and obstacles to integration in the Caribbean community. He zeroed in on immigration challenges, the interests of Caribbean nationals, re-engineering of the CARICOM Secretariat, and focusing on priority issues such as transportation, energy, food, and climate change. As the co-architect of the 1973 Treaty of Chaguaramas, the former Prime Minister called for an immediate overhaul of CARICOM's revised treaty. Do stay tuned, there is more of the diary.
The East Bank Demerara is undergoing significant transformation as the drive to ensure that Guyanese own their own homes continue. The Housing Ministry's vision is to distribute 30,000 house lots on that corridor alone within the next 5 years.
Community development plans will serve as a springboard for advancing Amerindian development. With the signing of the agreement with the United Nations Development Fund for the release of the GRIFT funds, soon 27 communities will begin implementation of their plans, with most of them focusing on various aspects of farming.
Preparations are on the way for another phase of the Hinterland electrification program, even as 11,000 solar panels were distributed last year. Government's vision is to ensure that every hinterland household has access to electricity within 5 years.
The Chinese Spring Festival and the New Year will officially be celebrated on February 10. But as a prelude, the Chinese Embassy in Guyana hosted a fair in the National Park on January 27 to mark the occasion. It was both enlightening and entertaining. The fair attracted a large turnout with performances by Chinese acrobats, local dance groups, and a fashion show. Prime Minister Hines, performing the duties of president, joined the fun-filled event in the company of the new Chinese ambassador to Guyana, Zhang Laimin, with high praises to the Chinese embassy.
I wish to commend the Chinese Association of Guyana for planning a series of activities to commemorate this significant milestone in the history of China-Guyana relations.
The official Chinese New Year is regarded the Year of the Snake. The fair is the first for China's newly appointed ambassador to Guyana.
I'm very happy to see so many Guyanese friends here sharing in these festive celebrations with us. First of all, on behalf of the Chinese Embassy in Guyana, I wish to convey to the government and the people of Guyana the very best wishes for the Spring Festival. I wish to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for taking time off his busy schedule to be with us today. I also wish to thank the Chinese Association for their great efforts in organizing this Spring Festival fair. Like Christmas in the Western world, Spring Festival is the most important traditional Chinese festival. With a history of over 2,000 years, it signifies the blossoming of flowers in the warm spring, new beginnings. It symbolizes the love that Chinese people have for happiness.
The activity coincided with the 160th anniversary of the arrival of Chinese in Guyana, and was also used as an occasion to reflect on the long-standing bilateral relations between Guyana and China.
Guyana and China, which is rooted in strong historical and cultural links, has grown over the past 40 years of diplomatic relations between our two countries. These relations have transformed our relationship into a more dynamic, comprehensive, and mutually beneficial partnership that encompasses active cooperation in a wide spectrum of spheres.
Joining the fair were officials from the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office of the State Council of the People's Republic of China, who had earlier paid a courtesy call on the acting president. Followers of different religious faiths in Guyana converged at the National Control Center on February 1 to mark the beginning of Interfaith Harmony Week, a week designated by the United Nations 3 years ago. The week allowed for the different religious faiths to gather for religious dialogue in the spirit of peace, love, harmony, and mutual understanding of the different religious denominations. World Interfaith Harmony Week follows a clarion call by King Abdullah II of Jordan on September 23, 2010, for the global community to engage in constructive dialogue. Guyana, with a proud culture where different religious beliefs coexist, has been supporting the United Nations designated week by organizing activities to bring awareness about the activity. On February 1, Prime Minister Hines, performing the duties of president, joined the religious community at the National Cultural Center for World Interfaith Harmony Week.
Interfaith harmony is the sustainer of religious freedom and a desired outcome and reward for religious freedom. May we keep striving for interfaith harmony throughout the year, and may all our strivings be blessed with success.
Guyana's constitution endorses the freedom of religion and the propagation of one's faith, and the numerous prayers and reflections by the Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Baha'i, and Rastafarian communities at the observance bore evidence. The United Nations resident representative to Guyana, Khadija Musa, spoke on behalf of the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon about the billions the world over who are devoted to their faiths as an essential foundation of life. Activities conclude on February 7 with an interfaith harmony walk, followed by a cultural activity at the Promenade Gardens. That's all in this week's edition of The Diary for the period January 26 to February 1. The highlights before we go. President addresses poverty, drugs, and Caribbean economies at a summit in Chile. He attends a Sustainable Development Conference in Delhi, India, and former Jamaican Prime Minister P.J. Patterson meets Guyana's Prime Minister and Acting President Samuel Hines. Do join us next week when we bring you more. I am Fibin Kraus, thanking you for joining us. Have a pleasant and safe rest of the week.